Hello, everyone. I wanted to come out this morning and talk a little bit about a book I just finished reading called Doom Guy, Life in First Person. This one right here, the one you see behind me. It's written by John Romero. If you don't know who John Romero is, he is one of the creators of Doom. He's one of the people who came up with the first person shooter game genre. He One of his first games, I mean, he was working at game companies off and on throughout his life, but one of the first games he came up with that was actually under his own sort of flagship was Wolfenstein 3D. So the Wolfenstein came first, Doom came second, and Doom, and those two collectively, I think, changed the genre of video games, or created really the genre of video games for first-person shooters. Now, the book itself is not just about video games; it's about John's life, really. And honestly, there's a lot of stuff in it that truly surprised me, including about his upbringing, where he grew up in not the best conditions with an abusive father, and how games helped him kind of overcome that situation. In particular, how coding did. How coding helped him kind of escape that life and get into something else. And the thing that really got me about it was I started thinking back to this era of video games, and I'm old enough for, John's not that much older than I am, so he's a couple years older than I am, but not terribly. And I was not terribly far behind him in the computer world. So when he was coming up in video games and computers and coding, you had to get some of this stuff to work. You had to be really good at writing software code, to get writing code to get the machine that you had in front of you to run the game. You were at the limit of what the machine could do in some cases, and there were games they wanted to develop that were beyond the limits of the games that they had that they wanted to build. So it was a world where you had to be good. He was a great assembly language programmer. If you don't know what assembly is, I mean, it's one of the tough ones, but lets you get as close to the processor as you can to really kind of make it as efficient as you can. It's more efficient than C, C++, Java, all of it. It's way more efficient than those. It's also harder working. Now, by comparison, today's games aren't um, bound by restriction on what you can do with hardware as much, nearly as much as they were then. There's probably still a little bit, but you can do a lot more now than you could back then, as far as colors and animation and graphics and how many people can play at once. It's just so much different now than it was. And he kind of goes through some of that evolution of gaming as it goes on. And you really learn a lot about what he and the people he worked with brought to the industry. So they not only did they bring the first person shooter, they brought deathmatch. Deathmatch was a situation in Doom where you could hook up to a LAN party or hook up to an online server and play against friends for the first time. Like I could be at my computer, you could be at your computer, and we could shoot each other and kill each other. Um, in the video game sense, not in real life. Now, it also led to, I think, a lot of other things that happened in the video game industry because these guys were able to innovate, and these guys were able to use the hardware as best they could. So they got very creative with not only the coding, but with the software itself, with the game itself. So they were creative on both sides. And now you don't have to be as creative with the coding to get things to work, but you should be creative in the gaming side. And what I've seen in gaming in the last 10 years, at least since the MMOs came on the scene, is there's not been a lot of innovation on the storytelling side. There's been rehashes of old things. There's a new Doom coming out, which I'm actually kind of looking forward to. How many Final Fantasies have we had? You go down the list of, oh, we're on Civilization 7, right? Well, but there's not really been a whole new sort of breakthrough thing that's come out, other than gaming on your phone, which is not the same as gaming on a PC or a platform, or like a Xbox or Nintendo or whatever it is you have, PS5. Is certainly much different. The book surprised me in a lot of ways. It wasn't as technically deep as it was, but it did show a few things on the business side of gaming that I was not familiar with, that I thought was pretty well written, very informative. You learn a lot about John and John's life, and also you learn that not everything he did was a wild success. Well, some of them were abject failures, and some of the abject failures came after Doom. Right, so it wasn't like, oh, fail, 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 Doom, yay, everything's a success from here on out. No, it was Doom, Doom 2, Quake took a long time to get out, so they had some issues. hey, let's try to figure out how to keep the company afloat while we're working on Quake. Quake's not quite what we wanted, so okay, now let's leave and go start another company. Let's go back to our roots. Company failure after company failure after company failure for a bit there, trying to get another one off the ground. But he's now running a company called Romero Games. So I think I don't say he's given up. I think he's still in the industry. I think he's still working, but I think he's regrouped a bit and learned from both his success and his failure, and all that's in the book. He didn't really pull too many punches on the failures. He actually admitted his own shortcomings in a few cases, which I thought was unique. Normally, you don't see that. But one of the things I found truly interesting in here was he did say that because of his upbringing as in a sort of an abusive home, he learned to just sort of avoid conflict. And sometimes it doesn't work in a startup company. You really need to kind of have the conflict and get it out. He also learned some other things to not do when you are in the gaming industry. Just straight from him. Don't hype what you don't have. Never hype a game beyond the limits of the actual game. And there's a whole list of them, but I want to read two. Don't hype what you don't have, I think is important. The second one, I think, speaks to many, many, many industries, and I agree with John Romero on this in more ways than I can ever possibly explain. Never insult your fans, even in jest. Looking at you, movie industry and video game industry and RPG industry. Never insult your fans, even in jest. Don't do it. Okay. Alienate the fans, you won't have them anymore. And that comes from John Romero, one of the big names in the video game space. So love the book. It's a couple years old now. I don't remember when it came out. I just recently discovered it, so I'm a bit behind. Sorry about that. But it did come out in 2023, so it's not that old, but it is a little bit over a year old, I guess. And a great read. Give it a shot if you'd like. It's on paperback, Kindle, hardback. I got the hardback because I'm sort of that junkie. But I think it has some great lessons for it about the direction of the video game and gaming industry in general. And I think in a broader sense, the entertainment industry can learn some lessons from his mistakes. So Doom Guy, Life in First Person by John Romero. Pick it up. It's a good book. Everybody have a great one.